Yeah, it was just a normal Saturday afternoon. People are outside, my neighbors are chilling, playing music, people are washing their cars. The one guy said to me, asked me for my key, and I laughed at him, and I just said no. But the next thing, he grabbed my arm. I don't know how long this thing went on for, but when I looked at the rest of the street, there was no one. Like, I was alone, screaming. I just remember looking down, and he shot the gun, and I froze. I just gave him the key, like I probably should have done from the beginning.
South Africa has one of the highest hijacking statistics in the world. According to Crime Stats SA, the number of reported hijackings stood at 9,988 in 2013. While some may view this figure as a relief from 2009's record figure of 14,915, Dr. Johan Berger of the Institute for Security Studies says South Africa is in for a disappointment when the 2014 national crime statistics are released next month.
Well, if you look at the national figure, there has been an increase of about 5.4% in the last financial year. But you have to compare that against a 35% decrease in the last 4 years. We do believe that the upward trend that we've already seen in the last 2 years, and especially last year, will continue. From the early stats that we've received from other sources, we see huge increases in some of our more serious crimes, especially violent property-related crimes such as the various categories of aggravated robbery. So all the indications are that these will be going up.
His ominous outlook can perhaps be supported by the spate of hijackings that have occurred recently, particularly in South Africa's economic hub, Gauteng.
Almost half of all the hijackings in South Africa takes place in Gauteng. I mean, in the last financial year, the 2012-2013 financial year, there were 9,990 hijackings in South Africa, and just under 5,000 of those happened in Gauteng, closely followed by KwaZulu-Natal with about 2,500. That's 3/4 of all hijackings.
Motor vehicles in South Africa don't come cheap. For example, in the US, this VW GTI starts at $25,000. In South Africa, the same model starts at $37,261. The personal cost of hijacking can have damaging financial effects to you and your business. On a broader scheme, the costs of this crime to the country's economy are immeasurable. Chief economist at Efficient Group, Dawie Root, puts it into perspective.
Whenever you see statistics in any country with high levels of crime, or where private property is not protected, where there are high levels of murder, for instance, or high levels of hijacking, for instance, that impacts on that economy, or the performance of that specific economy. It impacts on the performance of that economy because people are not free to move around, they're not free to contract, they're not free to allocate their resources in the economy, and inevitably the economy suffers because of that. Additionally, certain crimes, like for example hijacking, like for example murder, usually get a lot of publicity. Foreigners read that, the local business people read that, and that sends a very negative image and a very negative message about investments in a particular country. South Africa is pretty much known for its high levels of crime, it's known for its high levels of murder, and it's certainly known for its high levels of car hijacking as well. And that, of course, sends out a bad message, and the image is that South Africa is not a very friendly place where to do business, and inevitably that impacts on the economy as well. To put a number to that is basically impossible. We do not know what business we are losing out on. We do not know how much money we're losing out by way of lost investments, for example, in the economy. And we also do not know what the real cost is to the allocation of resources to the economy. It's possible to calculate how many or to get the information on how many car hijackings we've had and to put a number to that. But that's only a fraction of the total cost, because the total cost and much more is actually much more than the cost of this hijacking only. There's all sort of other issues that will not be captured into official data.
Exactly what happens to the stolen vehicles remains unclear.
Most of these syndicates are international syndicates with branches in South Africa, but we also have homegrown syndicates that work from South Africa. Some of them end up in being taken apart and the parts being used as spare parts, but most of them get moved across the border to the market waiting for them, the African market. Many of our cars are seen in some of our neighboring states, and people have seen them there. And of course, something the police have been neglecting the last number of years. But there was a time, 3-4 years ago, when the police had joint operations with police organizations in neighboring states and elsewhere in Africa, where they were able to identify and to reclaim many of our stolen cars.
But Derek Mende, head of strategic development at Datadot, has a different view.
Generally, vehicles are stolen for a reason, to be turned into cash. People don't steal vehicles for the asset value. They want to turn them into money, right? Mm-hmm. So what actually happens is Datadot technology attacks the business side of organized crime. Why? Because that vehicle can't have its identity changed. You always hear about clones. Cloning is the big part of organized crime. That's the best way for them to turn assets into cash. It's not chopping them. Chopping is about 20% of the cars are chopped. Just some of your stats for you. About 10 to 15% leave the country, but 60% remain here, have their identity changed, and are driving on our roads.
Perhaps an ode to Newton's law of motion, where every action has an equal but opposite reaction. The hijacking victim's loss is someone else's gain. Hijacking has created a booming effect on industries such as vehicle tracking companies, driving safety schools, and insurance companies. Hugo van Zyl, the chief operating officer of the South African Insurance Crime Bureau, declined to reveal any concrete figures before the crime stats are released in September. He did, however, label vehicle crime as an economic disaster for the insurance industry. He estimates that it has cost the South African market more than $280 million.
Well, let's take a look now at what we were talking about earlier, a disruptive technology called Datadot, which was featured in an episode of CSI.
Anyways, what do you got?
I have the year, make, and model of the car, if it helps.
That helps a lot. Did you get the fingerprints off the taillights?
Microdots. These are targeting high-end lenses now, so manufacturers are dotting them. I'm running them in through DMV now.
You give me the who, I gave you the how.
Datadot is microdot anti-theft technology. Unlike traditional tracking companies that install a single device on your vehicle, Datadot is the installation of 10,000 microdots, each etched with a unique PIN code. Removing 10,000 microdots on a vehicle is virtually impossible.
By the sounds of this should solve all our problems. If every car can have one of these and it is foolproof, in other words, wherever it is, the cops can catch up with it, why haven't all cars got this already?
Look, it's a process. So far we've dotted over 2 million cars, which is really shows a lot of progress. And as you would know, that legislation was promulgated in 2012. So as a result of that, any new car that gets registered in the country now has to have microdots. But in addition to that, any car that requires police clearance needs dots. So slowly but surely, I think we're getting there.
This technology will set you back $50 per vehicle. Traditional tracking device services, however, sees consumers digging a little deeper into their pockets. Companies such as Alltech Netstar and CarTrack provide a range of products and services from entry-level to advanced tracking.
We started just over 10 years ago, actually, and focused on stolen vehicle tracking and recovery. That was the initial plan. Over the years, though, some 5 or 6 years ago, we decided to move also into the fleet management arena.
We installed 16,000 devices last month, in the month of July, but it was a particularly busy month. We landed a lot of huge tenders, particularly in the government sector, which is interesting. It shows that our municipalities are more concerned about protecting their assets and their drivers.
Competition, it's become a very competitive market, but that's been the case for many years now. And I guess that's been really good for the industry and the consumer on both sides.
They've certainly eaten into the market share. And to put that into perspective, I think there are around 45 fleet management service providers in South Africa, and probably about 5 or 6 serious stolen vehicle recovery service providers. Fortunately, the market has grown.
Altec Netstar offers several product options, where the once-off device and installation fee ranges from about $85 to $285. Thereafter, monthly subscription ranges from about $15 to $30. Cartrack's fees are just about the same.
They hijacked my dad in the garage, and they took whatever was on him and his car, obviously.
And they put her in the passenger seat and pointed a gun at her. And then they told her to drive direct to the house.
We also quite wary about creating the unstealable car, because the moment that happens, it could become a bit dangerous for the owner. So our view is, get out of the car as quickly as you can.
The car was found in Pretoria 2 days later.
My dad did have a tracker on the car, and he was able to get the car back. The car was found about 3 kilometers away from the house.
As to the success of the technologies, Mende says 52% of vehicles have been recovered using dot-to-dot technology. Cartrack's recovery rate is 94%, and Altec Netstar is very proud of their 92% recovery success rate.
Yes, our average is under an hour. It can take longer. We've had trucks taken out of South Africa and returned to the country 6 months later. They've undergone a complete facelift, spray job. They look different.
Nikki Peacock facilitates an anti-hijacking course in Johannesburg under the business Your Driving School. She and the owner of the driving school initiated the course after both had become victims of hijackings. The majority of her clients are companies rather than individuals, which she says is disappointing. The course costs about $36 per person. She takes us through one of the life-saving lessons.
One very important fact to remember if you are being hijacked. Should the conclusion of the drama be that you're going to be hurt in any way, get out the car, put your hands up and drop straight to the ground. That's very important. And listen to what the hijacker is saying. Listen to the leader and obey him.
It goes without saying that those who are hijacked suffer an emotional cost as well. But in the long term, everyone suffers an economic cost that may take on devastating consequences.